Here is the thing that is never going to happen, is that the narcissistic person is going to take care of you as you age. What could happen is that the narcissistic person's health could go downhill before yours, and then you would have the rather unappealing prospect of having to care for an ungrateful, selfish person who has made your life miserable, along with you having to take on the physical wear and tear of caregiving. Future faking is such a common pattern in narcissistic relationships, and a really important one to understand. It entails making promises to change, promises about future events or future wants that the other person, you, in the relationship wants, with the goal of the narcissistic person keeping the relationship together or getting whatever they want from the other person in the relationship or getting what they want now. So, for example, if you were in a relationship with a narcissistic person, you said you want to get married and have children, and the other person said no, then you may end the relationship, right? But if the person said yes, but not for at least 2 years after I finish this or that, you may stay in the relationship on the basis of that promise. So then the 2 years will pass, and then the marriage and children will never happen because they decide to put it off again. They never really wanted it in the first place, but they wanted to keep you around. Let's say they want to spend some money now on something they want. They'll make you a deal that, I don't know, if they don't make their investment back in 6 months, then they'll give up this venture. But in those 6 months, then the money may be gone. Future faking may be made on the basis of time. In 3 years, we're going to do this. On 6 months, that we're going to do that. In a year, X or Y is going to happen. Or on the basis of, or after a certain event happens. Once I finish school, once I make partner, once this difficult time at work is done, once I retire. Future faking is also plausible. While in some cases future faking may be grandiose, we're going to live in a 20-bedroom house and have a jet, but there's really no clear path forward to that. In most cases, the future faking is believable. We're going to get a house. I'm going to go into therapy. We're going to give everyone an extra 3 days of vacation time this month, or this year, if you can do extra work for less money now. Ultimately, future faking gets the future faker something now. You stay, you work for less money or no money, you do something they want you to do, you have sex with them, you loan them money. And future faking also keeps us stuck. If someone promises something plausible, we care about the person. We want to believe in them, we want to believe them, and we ourselves may be invested in a certain outcome with them. We may believe the fake. And when future faking happens early on, we don't know it's future faking. We just hear a promise and we want to believe that it's true. So we go with it. And the only way we know it's fake is that the amount of time had to have passed by, right? We're going to get engaged in 2 years. After the company goes public, in a year, you're all going to make a lot of money. We will go out to dinner next Saturday, but let's just stay home and have sex tonight. And the thing they promise never happens. But in the interim, they get to keep you around, get your work, and get laid. By then, you've waited and put in the time and may feel foolish or used. Then future faking can become a form of gaslighting. When you call them out, every time you say to them, hey, every time you say you're going to do something down the line, it never happens, they may come back with, are you really going to expect me to deliver on life with you on such a tight schedule? Is that what this is? Is our relationship just a delivery system? If you really love me, you would trust me and believe I'll make it happen. Or they'll say, therapy takes time. I can't change overnight. Won't you just support me as I do this? I thought you were much more loving than that. And then you fall for that. And you feel bad that you're trying to rush them through their process. So that's what it is, and you kind of knew that, right? So let's talk about what isn't future faking. I know some folks are worried that they're future faking because nobody can predict the future, right? So maybe even if you suggest something down the line, like, hey, how about we go to Hawaii next year, and it doesn't happen, you may worry that you're a future faker. It's not how it works. So first, future faking isn't about talking about the future in a hopeful way. It's not saying, Wouldn't it be great if one day we had a nice house on a lake, or got to go on vacation to a certain place, or had a little baby girl? That's just thinking. That's almost daydreaming or wishing. Future faking is trying to entice something from someone else on the basis of a future promise. Just sharing daydreams is not future faking. It's saying, future faking is saying they're going to happen if the other person in the relationship just does something, or sticks around, or does what you want. That's what makes it future faking. Second, future faking is not about prediction or predicting something you or they hope to do. So if somebody says, I think I want to learn how to scuba dive, or I intend to meet with 2 literary agents within the year, or I have a feeling I might stay in this job for 5 more years. In these cases, the person is making a prediction for themselves, but it is not contingent on someone else or requiring something from someone else. The third thing that's not future faking is making a realistic assessment about how long something is going to take. If you say something like, it's going to take 3 years to finish building this house, it's going to take 10 years before I pay off this loan, in 12 years the children will no longer be in school in this town. Many times future faking is about unrealistic assessments of time. They'll say, we absolutely are going to get this house built within 6 months. You need to trust me. And as long as you do this or this or this, I know it'll get done in 6 months. So they get what they need from you, money or whatever. But predicting how long something will take in a realistic time frame, saying, for example, going to high school takes 4 years, that's not future faking. So fourth is, if a person has a believable plan to get to a goal, that also isn't future faking, especially if they take responsibility for it. It can't be that, like, if they say to you, if you do this and this and this, then I will magically start this new business in 6 months. That's not going to work, right? That's still future faking. But if you have a reasoned approach and somebody's taking responsibility, then that, and they have a plan forward, that's not future faking. A fifth thing that's not future faking is if they, you, someone, is putting something off or suggesting something you want is down the road. If you give them what they want now, that there is first the acknowledgement that the future event is important to you, and second, a plausible connection between what is being asked of you now and the attainment of the future event. So that's not future faking. But if they say to you, you just need to be working and making money so I can start my new screenwriting career, and then after I get my first produced film and win an Oscar, then you can go back to school, that's future faking. But if saying, like, listen, if for the next year you can do this, and we can save this much money, then that, and it seems plausible and they understand it's a sacrifice for you, again, probably not future faking. So the best way to remember it is probably this simple formula. Future faking, they want something. To get it, they make a future promise about something that you want, but it won't happen until down the line. They engage in this behavior to get what they want now. That thing they promised down the line almost never happens or happens rarely. If you question them, they doubt your commitment or call you demanding. And the thing that they're promising is plausible. Those are sort of the ingredients of future faking. All of this can set people up to be stuck for years. And then there are always the twists. You may be in a situation where it's half future faking, half not. That the first few times they say something's going to happen, it actually happens. But peppered in that is the times it doesn't happen. And then over time, more and more you see it's not going to happen. They promise the thing and it doesn't. That makes it hard because you're still going to look back on, but in the past they did this and they did that. That's why narcissistic relationships are so treacherous. They're very gray. It's not like every time they lied about the future. Enough times they didn't. And that confusion is what can often keep survivors stuck in a loop for a really long time. So let's talk a little bit about something I'm going to call realistic future faking. Let me give you some examples of realistic future faking. Once we close the deal, we're going to go away together for a week, right? And the deal closes in about a month. Or we're going to have the holiday dinner at your house next year. Or Once we get the end of year figures, which I'm confident will be great, we're going to be hiring more people. So you just need to work through this holiday season and it won't happen again. That feels believable if someone said that to you, right? The future faking that is not too future. The future faking that pins to something specific, that seems plausible. For example, in a month, in fact, you knew that that deal will close. That seems like a reasonable amount of time to wait for. You can put it in your calendar. Or in that family, they said it's everyone at the table. The holiday dinner is going to be at your house next year, and you can plan for it because you know the date, the holiday's at the same time every year. That seems believable. Or the manager in your company, they're confident about these end of year figures. So you're thinking like, okay, one holiday season, it's worth it because then next year is going to be easier. And there are even some people you like at your job, right? Plausible future faking is actually quite awful because it firms up the trauma-bonded justifications. And it actually plays on your short-term hopes, which is a lot of what get us through life and get us through the day. With plausible, realistic future faking, we are often more likely to gaslight ourselves. Listen, it's one thing if the narcissistic person says to you, hey, I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to change and it will all be better. Or after the narcissistic person cheats on you 5 times, says something to you like, it won't happen again. Or when the narcissistic person says, okay, don't worry, next time it will be different. Or after you finally find the strength to leave the relationship or go no contact, they finally reach you and make all the promises and you go back. That's the traditional kind of future faking, the sort of empty promises, no set date, no clear outcome. If the deal closes on June 15th, it is plausible that you will go on vacation on June 21st, right? Those are hard and fast things. If the narcissistic person says something flimsy, like I won't do it again, and they've done it many times, having said they won't do it again in the past too, well, that's a bit of a sucker bet, right? So all future faking works because the narcissistic person is promising something we really want. In a way, and this is where it's so nefarious, it shows that they were sort of listening to us. For example, they could hear that we wanted them to make time for vacation, or that we really wanted to host the holiday in our new house, or that the feedback that your workload and the staffing, that it was untenable, that there wasn't enough support, that feedback was finally getting through. But when the future faking is plausible, something that's concrete, or it's realistic, or it can be done soon, we buy it. And sadly, we might even feel heard because what they're promising seems realistic, so we stick it out for a little longer. And in this way, we can sort of stumble, punch drunk a month at a time, 6 months at a time, waiting for that next realistic hurdle to cross. And where it gets really tricky is when some of the promises they make do come through. Then it's not future faking, obviously. Then we are back at the intermittent reinforcement in those slot machines I'm always talking about. If they keep every 5th promise or every 10th promise, then there's the possibility that all those promises that they don't keep in between, but there's a possibility that those other promises could be true too. And when that happens, the future faking becomes a potent trauma bond and stuckness catalyst because we believe that the thing that they're dangling in front of us is real. And when it doesn't happen, we may even think, well, nobody gets it right every time. And we did go on vacation a few years ago when they promised it would happen then. So we think, well, it's possible it could happen now. The loosey-goosey future faking, the I'm going to change, or I see what I need to do, or I'm not going to cheat on you again, that stuff, we start to get that pretty fast. We know they're not going to do those things, especially when they cannot articulate what exactly it is that they need to change. That should right there be a big future fake red flag. We also know they won't change if they aren't offering up a true apology. They say BS like, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I can see that you're bothered. That's not an apology. An apology means that they see that they did or said a bad thing or a hurtful thing. But I think we forget that there are different shades and forms of future faking, and that plausible, realistic future faking is tricky. So pay attention when it happens. When it's realistic, you don't have to go shooting it down, right? You don't have to say things to them like, that's never going to happen. I know you won't do it. I know you can say that inside, but there's no point telling them that. But pay attention to how it may lead you to push down your concerns about the relationship and your clarity about the relationship. Recognize that sometimes when those promises are kept, every so often, they see through the thing they promised, it becomes even trickier. Because the promises aren't the problem in these relationships. It's the day-to-day betrayals, invalidations, manipulations, cruelties. And future faking becomes one more manipulation to keep you where they want you. And to hedge against any future faking, we have to be well aware of our fantasies and hopes for these relationships as well. Because in those cases, in a way, we may be future faking ourselves. We can waste a lifetime waiting for the someday better. But as an important exercise here, stop and ask yourself how you would feel if you waited another 5 years, another 10 years, and none of these promises of change or resources or experiences or whatever came true. You stay based on how it is today, not on the basis of the fantasy or hope of what it could be. That's what's important. Because when we put our hope into the future faking or any future with a narcissistic person, the mistake we make is that we pull the hope out of ourselves. So here's a question that's come up a few times that people have brought to me. Does a narcissist know that they are future faking? Or do they believe that they can change or deliver on these future faked promises? Drop your answers in the chat. I'd love to read those. Because future faking is the worst. Because it's an almost impossible thing to work around. If you are in a narcissistic relationship and you are future faked, there is no way to call it out in the moment if you are still justifying and stuck. If the thing that is being future faked, things like, when I get the promotion, we will move and I'll be home more, or I'm going to get into therapy and do this or that. The fact is, it takes a minute for those things to happen. So frankly, the only people who often feel able to take a stand against future faking are those who have been so repeatedly future faked that one day they have enough evidence to say, you promised this 10 times. Well, the narcissist, no, this time's different. And hopefully the person has the fortitude to say, not after 10 times do I believe you. But that means that the person has wasted years, maybe even decades, to gather the evidence that the future faking was indeed fake. Now, in case you don't know what it is, future faking is keeping someone in a relationship on the basis of a promise to change, or that the thing the person wants will happen in a certain number of months. Most future fakes are for things that will happen within 6 months. Some can be longer term, like telling someone, I want children, but I'm going to want them after I get a certain amount of stability and make a certain amount of money. And when they actually get to that point, they don't actually want kids, and by the time you figure it out, it may be a little bit too late in the game for you to get out and feel that you might be able to find someone else to have children with. So it really can be quite awful. Years can get wasted on future faking, and like I said, many times people don't call it out. So for example, if a person says, yep, I'm going to get therapy and I'm going to change, you can't say, do it now, change this instant. You have to wait for them to make the call and see the therapist and on and on. That takes a minute. And if enough stuff of life is happening or distraction while this promised therapy is launching, if it ever launches, you may even forget that promise, and then the problem's going to come up again, and you're right back where you started. So the question, though, that was brought to me is whether they know, the narcissistic person knows they're future faking. Is it deliberate? With narcissistic folks, the only thing that is consistently deliberate is them doing something to get what they want or need now and do what works for them. So they'll make promises, tell lies, whatever they need to do to get what they want or need now. If they need to stay in a relationship with you, then they are going to make a promise around what you are asking for to keep you around. That's the short-term play. And once that gets settled, they figure that the rest of it will work out. Narcissistic and psychopathic individuals are not only impulsive, they don't always think about consequences clearly. Narcissistic people don't care about other people, so they don't think about what more waiting or letting a person down again will do to that person. All they know is that they told you that they would do what you asked down the road, so you don't leave them or get mad at them or take away validation from them. They are arrogant and grandiose enough to believe that it will all work out and unempathic enough to not care how it will affect you. They don't think they need to change. Now, that's not all narcissists. I am guessing that about 10% of people, and that's a ballpark, maybe it's generous actually, with narcissistic personalities, may recognize that they need to change, that their lives are a mess, that they've burned lots of bridges, and they may actually not want to hurt people anymore. They've sort of hit that rarest of rock bottoms, the blessed unicorns. It doesn't mean that they can, but those folks may be able to make some small, potentially sustainable changes, maybe enough to relieve some of the pressure. But frankly, when the stress levels are up again and the disappointment returns, there's a pretty strong likelihood that the antagonistic behavior will return. All of that said, the narcissistic person, when they are future faking, they aren't thinking of changing. They are thinking about what they need to do at that moment to get what they want. Whether that is taking money from you that they say they'll pay back, borrowing your car that they say they'll have back in time for you to go to work or something, that it's time served in therapy so that you don't leave them. Whatever they want right then, that's what they're focused on. They aren't thinking about whether they can change or be better, nor are they thinking about their behavior as manipulative future faking. They are thinking about what they want now and how to get it, regardless of what the cost is going to be for you. It's hard to change when we don't think change is necessary. It's hard to change when we think it is. It's almost impossible when we don't. And this is compounded by the inconsistent empathy that we see in narcissism. People with empathy may still find it hard, for example, to keep their socks picked up off the floor or do the dishes, but they may do it because they know it matters to another person. That isn't the same motivator for narcissistic folks. They don't care about the other person. So future faking is a quick fix for them. And they aren't even connecting it to having to make real changes or delivering on their future promises. They're doing it to get something done now. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, I was about to say something that I recognized it wasn't going to be right. So yeah, so that's the, I hope that answers that question, because a lot of people have brought it to me. And then reflect on your own future faking in your relationship, because I got to tell you, it's one of the real central dynamics of these relationships, one that can really cause a lot of people to waste a lot of time. So let's talk about the ultimate future faking. You know what it is? The idea of growing old together with a narcissistic person. It really may be the most dangerous future fake of all, and has been an utter tragedy for many people in narcissistic marriages, and frankly, even for the adult children of a parent in a narcissistic marriage. I mean, if you want to be semantic about it, I guess you do grow old together on paper with the narcissistic person if you stay in the marriage, but in the true sense of that adage, do you grow old together? Nah. This concept of growing old together, I guess we should say successfully, is a real roll of the dice. Because for one person or the other, someone in the relationship is always going to get stuck doing some caregiving, whatever that looks like. At the milder end, it may be someone sort of stepping in and having to do more household duties because bodies slowly give out as we get older. And it may be, at that more extreme end, it may be caring for a person or ensuring a person who is experiencing dementia or other age-related physical impairments is cared for and may need help with things like toileting, getting in and out of bed, maybe even other basic duties like having meals prepared, being fed, being dressed, or being bathed. And in the United States, at least, most of us do not have the money it would take to afford any kind of decent care in this regard when we get older. And we'll definitely run out of money if we even had it in the first place to do this in a matter of weeks or months, basically to hire any kind of paid caregiver. I have had definitely the experience of working with many, many folks who have gone through and are still in long-term narcissistic intimate relationship, 40 plus years, even 50 and 60 plus years. So these were folks who were well into their 60s and beyond. And this is an important group because we didn't talk about narcissism until relatively recently in the way that we do now. And that means that these are people who were tolerating toxic relationships, but didn't have any kind of word or model for it, and then had to listen to BS about how relationships are about hard work and compromise and sacrifice and two to tango nonsense. So people, because of the stigmas around not making a marriage work, persisted, again, because divorce was stigmatized and in some cases was not even possible. But most of them, even if they didn't say it out loud, knew the relationship was a bit of a mess. However, as time went on, those who remained trauma bonded would be reluctant to leave the relationship. And one big justification that we would observe people falling into was the idea of growing old with someone. And that was not a good justification. Listen, I understand the ones about not wanting to go into older age with no money, about losing a home. I definitely get that, and that's very real for older adults, particularly in the United States. But here is the thing that is never going to happen, is that the narcissistic person is going to take care of you as you age. What could happen is that the narcissistic person's health could go downhill before yours, and then you would have the rather unappealing prospect of having to care for an ungrateful, selfish person who has made your life miserable, along with you having to take on the physical wear and tear of caregiving for the rest of that person's and perhaps your life. However, the far worse option, and frankly, the more likely option, is that your health will deteriorate first, and you will have to count on them to care for you. Someday, we're going to get good longitudinal research on the long-term effect of narcissistic relationships and toxic relationships. If we cobble together what we know from other similar research on marital conflict and the like, it is not good for us. And I truly believe that the longer you are in a narcissistic or antagonistic marriage or relationship, the greater the toll on your health. Just from a simple stress model. The constant manipulation, criticism, entitlement, selfishness, the meanness, the stubbornness, the oppositionality, all of it, that accumulation. And keep in mind, most people in narcissistic relationships, especially as they get older, become quite isolated because you were not able to cultivate friendships. Other people may have distanced because they didn't like your spouse. Your children may be in different levels of estrangement from the family system. Whatever it may be, you don't even have a B team to help you out in some cases, or even just people to talk to and get support and validation from. So the odds that you will be the one facing the need for caregiving first is much more likely. So now you are getting older. Maybe you're watching this and you do have some physical health issues, or maybe you know someone who's in a situation, who's in a long-term narcissistic marriage and their memory is waning. Whatever it is, keep in mind, caregiving is no joke. It involves not only the physical aspects, feeding, changing, cooking, cleaning, but also the psychological aspects, reassuring, listening, seeing, and putting the needs of the person who needs to be cared for often ahead of your own. You tell me, folks, watching this video, in what universe would this ever be in the realm of possible for a narcissistic person? A narcissistic person thinks giving someone a glass of water is caregiving. Turning on a television is caregiving. Offering to bring home a bagel when they were already going out for one themselves is caregiving. It's iffy if they will remember any of the medications on a schedule, and will get angry at their spouse that needs to be taken care of when the narcissistic person themselves forgets the medication because, of course, the shame that makes them mad at a relatively helpless person. A narcissistic person who is in a position where they do have to engage in some form of caregiving will often gaslight, especially if the person they're caring for has a chronic illness. Things like, geez, you've seen like 1,000,000 doctors and it's not getting better. What's wrong with you? Are you exaggerating? In the most extreme cases of dark tetrad malignant narcissism, we can see the narcissistic person taking financial advantage of, or even being unfaithful, because they feel entitled to it since their spouse is no longer there. Whatever it is that this narcissistic person is doing, this is not caregiving. In most cases, what the narcissistic person does at this stage causes more harm, bringing up grief, as well as inadequate caregiving that can actually do real physical harm. So no, handing someone a glass of water is not caregiving. That's just handing someone a glass of water. Caregiving is a lot more than that. So the point of all this is the future fake. For everyone who sticks out a marriage in the long term because of fears of growing old alone, who believes that, well, at least I have someone around as I grow old. Listen, I get all the practical reasons, but the idea that this narcissistic person may possibly be available to be a responsible caregiver, probably, in fact, I'd say absolutely not. That moment of them seeing you fragile and them magically growing a heart like the Grinch, it's not happening. Your illness will be their inconvenience. This can also sometimes mean that other people in your world would have to take up the caregiving slack. This can put a pressure on adult children, other family members, people who may be willing to step up, but also may not always be able to. Maybe they live someplace else. Maybe they don't have the financial means and can't take time off from work to do this. Maybe they have their own burdens, like their own children, or maybe other people they have to care for. And not everyone who has been through a narcissistic relationship, as I said, may have these supports. Isolation can mean that bridges got burned long ago, children may be distanced from the system, and some of you may not have children or other people in a family system that could even possibly be caregivers. You may also feel a sense of guilt at burdening adult children with something that you thought a spouse would and theoretically should do. Remember all that sickness and health stuff? I don't think they were paying attention. Then there is the money issue. I have never in all my days doing this work met a narcissistic person who is sane about money. Never, not once. Money is power and they use it to control people. They spend it to keep people close. They withhold it to punish people. They shame people for spending it. So as time goes on and decisions about healthcare or caregiving come up and you see the writing on the wall and want to pay someone, guess who is going to fight it? Which feels like a double bind because not only are you not able to potentially solicit your own caregiving that you pay for, and it is likely that after a long marriage or a relationship that your finances are very intermingled. So that's yet another bind. You can't get the money out to pay for caregiving, and they won't care for you. And then the final piece of this future faking that may be the most painful is the grief. After all this time in this relationship, the sacrifice, trying everything, blaming yourself, holding up 99% of the relationship, that you are basically going to be abandoned at a time and an hour of medical need is horrific. It can result in rumination, tremendous sadness, and an unending well of grief at a time when people are taking stock of their entire lives. And that rumination and grief can worsen physical health. It's a terrible cycle and a terrible way for a person to enter the final phase of life. This is real, folks. So if you think you have a built-in carer in the form of your narcissistic spouse or partner, think again and plan accordingly. You may stay financially, but start doing your homework. while you are still sound in mind and body. Miracles don't happen in narcissistic relationships. So let's take on this issue, because what I'm about to talk about is really a little bit like punching yourself in the face, but it's a thing. Now, we know future faking when the narcissistic folks do it. They say, I'm going to change. I'm going to therapy. We're going to have kids after this or that happens. That you're going to get your raise once we get this new contract. Or next Thanksgiving, we're not going to invite your uncle. Don't worry. And you know the drill. They don't go to therapy. They don't change. They stall things that matter to you. You never see the raise. And the abusive uncle is right there front and center at the next Thanksgiving. But a key part of trauma bonding is when we future fake ourselves. It's a way to hold on to hope and stay in the relationship. It's a way to deny and ignore and not have to deal with the mess in front of us and pin our hopes on a future day. So what does self-future faking look like? Well, one version of it is when we do it about the narcissistic person or the narcissistic relationship. So we'll say things like, they're going through a tough time at work. Once this deadline passes, everything's going to be so much better. Or, I know they're working lots of late nights so we can buy a home one day. As a way, and you say that to yourself, as a way not only to talk yourself out of their inappropriate and shady behavior, but also connect it to the future fake. You get two for the price of one there. Or you might say to yourself, they said they're looking for a therapist, and I know that once they work through their trauma, it's all going to be so much better. I just need to be patient, and I'm really a cold, horrible person if I don't give them the time they need to work through their stuff. So you get the double fun of self-blame on that self-future fake. Or another one could be, I know that next year's summer vacation is going to be different. I am sure it's going to be so much better. So that's one set of future faking about the relationship. But then there's the future faking that we do that also involves ourselves. So we may say things to ourselves like, once I get myself some therapy, this relationship's going to be so much better because I'm too anxious and I need to work on that. So you get self-blame plus future faking. Or another could be, I've got to do the work. I've got to plan more date nights for us. I just need to be more affectionate to him and just express more gratitude. And then things are going to get so much better. Now, in this case, you are putting the future hopes for the relationship on the changes you will make in yourself. Now, I am confident you can make those changes. I really am. The problem is that those changes are not going to result in the change you hope to see in the relationship. Change in you is not going to change the narcissistic relationship. But you link your changes, which are also going to take a minute, as changes do, to what you think will happen because of the self-blame as well. And that results in that type of self-future faking that focuses on the change that you believe can change the relationship down the line. It just doesn't work that way in a narcissistic relationship. Self-future faking is kind of another word for justification, like we would see in the trauma-bonded framework. But it involves something that will happen down the line, and it is almost always coupled with self-blame. I'm being too demanding. They have a tough backstory. Or around denial and self-reassurance. This just has to get better. It's going to get better. It has to get better. Cognitive dissonance would be raised if you decided to stay in something that is never going to get better, right? Oh, I'm going to stay in a relationship where I want children but my partner doesn't. Or Thanksgiving with my family always means my abusive uncle is there. Those statements are uncomfortable. So in order to make these relationships work, you level up the dissonance by making it about the future. Next year is going to be different. But by now, you know it won't be. To make the pieces fit in a narcissistic relationship, you make a bet about the future. And since you cannot predict the future, And hope can really muddy the waters of really thinking accurately in terms of probability. Well, then what you have is that you keep making these promises to yourself. Once they get the promotion, once the kids move out, once we move to a bigger house, once your sister moves out, once they go to therapy, once they end their affair, once the summer is over, then. The challenge here is that not only are you living in the future instead of now, you still are living in a future that's never going to happen. Yeah, I don't disagree. Some things may change if a person gets a promotion or you have a child or whatever the shift may be. Circumstantial things will change. Maybe there'll be more money, maybe there'll be less money, but also potentially more stress. For example, the arrival of a new baby, miraculous as it may be, is stressful as hell, unless you are a rich person who isn't having to deal with the messiness and the sleepless nights. And it is an unfathomable level of stress if you are not well resourced and you're doing this with a narcissistic co-parent. So yes, elements of life can change. Certain things can happen. But what will not change are the patterns inherent in a narcissistic relationship. Gaslighting, manipulation, blame shifting, rage, or difficulties with frustration, lack of empathy, entitlement, arrogance, all of that is not going to change. As always, if you remain in one of these relationships, you have to remain with the recognition, not easy, but that right there is radical acceptance, or you get out. Not easy, but that right there, that's the fear of the unknown. But please try not to future fake yourself, because when you do that, you end up blaming yourself more. Oh, I'm so stupid because I believe they would change. You are human. You love someone. You want to believe in them, in all of it. But if you want to assess a relationship, look at it now, today. Because that's that. Not on what you think it could look like one day. Because there's no evidence of that happening. If the fundamentals suck today, then that needs to be the basis of the decision. And odds are the fundamentals will suck down the line as well. Yeah, you just may be living in a different house or have more or less money or have kids or not. But the fundamentals of a narcissistic relationship will remain the same over time. You can count on the narcissistic folks future faking you. Don't make it more difficult by doing it to yourself. Thanks again.